Hello students, welcome to your channel. Please like, share and subscribe your own channel, School Studies. School Studies is pleased to announce the launch of our educational website, Patel Section. After years of hard work and dedication, we are delighted to officially announce the launch. Today we will see a video related to NCERT Solution for Class 10 History Social Science Chapter 3, The Making of Global World. So let's solve textbook exercise. Give two examples of different types of global exchanges which took place in the 17th century, choosing one example from Asia and one from the Americas. The following are examples of cross-cultural exchanges from Asia and Americas. The Silk Route, Asia. The Silk Routes are a good example of cross-cultural trade and connectivity between distant parts of the world. The name Silk Routes points to the importance of westbound Chinese silk cargoes along this route. Trade and cultural exchange always went hand in hand. Earlier Christian missionaries almost certainly traveled this route to Asia, as did early Muslim preachers a few centuries later. Food from the Americas. The food that is a part of our staple diet today, like potatoes, soya, groundnuts, maize, tomatoes, chilies, sweet potatoes, etc., were known to our ancestors until the accidental discovery of the Americas by Christopher Columbus. These foods only made to Europe and the rest of the world after this monumental discovery to a new continent. Next, explain how the global transfer of disease in the pre-modern world helped in the colonization of the Americas. The global transfer of disease in the pre-modern world helped in the colonization of the Americas. The reason was that the Native Americans cannot immune to the diseases that the European settlers brought with them. The Europeans were to a certain extent immune to the effects of disease like smallpox due to the centuries of exposure, but the Native Americans had no such defense against the disease, as they were isolated from disease native to the old world. At times, settlers deliberately practiced biological warfare on the natives by giving items laced with the smallpox germs as gifts of friendship. The disease were far more effective in wiping out entire tribes and communities without having to resort to firearms. Next, write a note to explain the effects of following. The British government's decision to abolish the Corn Laws. The British government's decision to abolish the Corn Laws was due to the pressure from the landed groups who were unhappy with the high price of food and the cheap inflow of agricultural products from Australia and America. As a result, many English farmers left their profession and migrated to towns and cities. Some went overseas. This indirectly led to global agriculture and rapid urbanization, a prerequisite of industrial growth. Next, the coming of rinderpest to Africa. The rinderpest arrived in Africa in the late 1880s. It had a terrifying impact on people's livelihood and local economy. It started in East Africa and soon spread to other parts of the continent. Within 5 years, it reached the Cape of Good Hope, by which it had killed 90% of the cattle population in the part of Africa. It spread through infected cattle imported from British Asia to feed the Italian soldiers invading Italia in East Africa. Using this situation to their advantage, colonizing nations conquered and subdued Africa by monopolizing scarce cattle resources to force Africans into the labor market. The Africans were forced to work for the wage due to the loss of their livelihood due to the effect of rinderpest. Next, the death of men of working age in Europe because of the World War. The First World War was the first modern industrial war. It saw saw the use of machine guns, tanks, aircraft, chemical weapons, etc. on the massive scale. To fight such a war, millions of soldiers had to be recruited from around the world and moved to the front lines on large ships and trains. The scales of death and destructions were unlike any other conflict in the modern era. Most of the killed and aimed were men of working age. The deaths and injuries of this men drastically reduced the able bodied workforce in Europe. Within fewer members within the family, household incomes declined after the war. Thus, women stepped in to do the jobs that were earlier done by men. It increased the role of women, led to a demand for equal status in society. It made the feminine movement even stronger. Write a note to explain the effect of the following: the Great Depression on the Indian economy. In the 19th century, colonial India had become an exporter of agricultural goods and importers of manufacturers. The impact of the Great Depression in India was felt, especially in the agricultural sector. It was evident that the Indian economy was closely becoming integrated into the global economy. India was a British colony and exported agricultural goods and imported manufactured goods. As international price crashed, so did the price in India. The wheat price in India fell by 50% between 1922 and 1934. Next, the decision of MNCs to relocate production to Asian countries. Wages were relatively low in Asian countries like China, thus became lucrative destination to investment by foreign MNCs competing to dominate world markets. The relocation of industry to low wage countries stimulated world trade and capital flow. Impact of MNC's decision to relocate production in Asian countries was as follows. It provided a cheap source of labor for MNCs. It stimulated world trade and increased capital inflow in the Asian countries. The local population now had a greater choice of goods and services along with sorry, prosecute of greater employment opportunity for them. Give two examples from history to show the impact of technology on food availability. Improved transportation systems. Improved transportation system helped the foods get delivered on time to the markets without any harm. Faster railways, lighter wagons, and larger ships helped move food cheaply and quickly from faraway farms to final markets. Refrigerated ships. The development of refrigerated ships enabled the transport of perishable foods for long distances. Animals were salted for food at the starting point in America, Australia, and New Zealand, and then transported to Europe as a frozen meat. This reduced shipping cost and lowered the meat price in Europe. The poor in Europe could now add meat to their diet, which was monotonous with only bread and potatoes. Next, what is meant by the Bretton Woods Agreement? In order to in order to preserve economic stability and full employment in the industrial world, the post-war industrial economic system was established. To execute the same, the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference was held in July 1944 at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, USA. The Bretton Woods Conference established the International Monetary Fund to deal with external surpluses and shortage of its member nation. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, popularly known as World Bank, was set up to financial post-war reconstruction, and they started the financial operation in 1947. Under the agreement, currencies were pegged to the price of gold, and the US dollars was seen as the reserve currency linked to the price of gold. Decision-making authority was given to the Western industrial power. The US was given the right to veto over key IMF and World Bank decisions. The Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rates. The Bretton Woods system opened an era of unique growth of trade and incomes for the Western industrial nations and Japan. Imagine that you are an intrepid Indian labor in the Caribbean. Drawing from the details in the chapter, write a letter to your family describing your life and feelings. So this is a small letter which I've wrote it here. You can also wrote the same way which I have wrote it, or you can copy down the same. Next, explain the three types of movements or flows within the international economic exchange. Find one example of each type of flow which involved India and Indians. Write a short account of it. So this is the three ways. The flow of trade. Trade in goods, that is, for example, cloth or wheat. India was a hub of trade in the pre-modern world, and it exported textiles and spices in return for gold and silver from Europe. Fine cotton was produced in India and was exported to Europe. With industrialization, British cotton manufacture began to expand. The industrialists pressurized the government to restrict cotton imports and protest local industries. As a result of the tariffs that were imposed on cloth import, the inflow of fine Indian cotton began to decline. The flow of labor. In the field of labor, indentured labor was provided for mines, plantation and factories abroad in huge numbers in the 19th century. This was an instrument of colonial domination by the British. Indentured laborers were hired under contact, which promised return travel to India after they had worked 5 years on their employer plantation. The living conditions were harsh and the laborers had little protection of law, or from it as they had little rights. The movement of capital. Lastly, Britain took in took generous loans from the US to finance the World War. Since India was an English colony, the impact of this loan debts was felt in India too. Food and other crops for the world market required capital. Large plantation could borrow it from banks and markets. Next, explain the cause of Great Depression. The Great Depression was a result of many factors. Agriculture overproduction was a major problem. As a result, agricultural prices fell. As prices fell, so did agriculture incomes. This increased the volume of goods in the market. The situation got worsened in the market. Prices fell down further. Farmer produce began to rot due to the lack of buyers. Prosperity in the USA during the 1920s created a cycle of higher employment and incomes. It led to the rise in consumption and demands. More investment and more employment created tendencies of speculations, which led to the Great Depression of 1929 up to the mid 1930s. The stock market crashed in 1929. It created panic among investors and depositors who stopped investing and depositing. As a result, it created a cycle of desperation sorry depreciation. The withdrawal of US loans affected the rest of the world in many different ways. In Europe, it led to the failure of the major banks and collapse of major currencies such as the British pound sterling. Some of the banks closed down when people withdraw all their assets, leaving them unable to invest. Some banks called bank back loans taken from them at the same dollar rate in spite of falling value of the dollar. Next, explain what is referred to as the G77 countries. In what ways can G77 be seen as a reaction to the activities of Bretton Woods twins? After the Second World War, many parts of the world were still under European colonial rule, and it took over 2 decades of the colonies in Asia and Africa to become free independent nation. When they became free, they faced many other problems such as poverty, lack of resources, etc. Economies and societies were handicapped for being under colonial rule for long periods. As colonies, many of the less developed regions of the world had been part of the Western empires. The policies of the Bretton Woods twins tilted over more in the favor of the developed nations of the Western world. Now, ironically, and newly independent countries facing urgent pressures to lift their populations out of poverty. They came under the guidance of international agencies dominated by the former colonial powers. Therefore, many colonies organized themselves as a group, the Group of 77 or G77, to demand a new international economic order. By the neo, they felt met a system that will give them real control over their natural resources, more development assistance, fairer prices over for raw materials, and better access for their manufactured goods in developed countries market. So this was chapter 3 of NCERT solution for class 10th history. I hope you like my video. Thanks for watching my video. Thank you. Please leave comment, question or doubts in comment section if you have any, or you can drop a mail to us. You will find my email ID at the end of this video. You can also join us on Facebook page, follow us on Instagram, connect us on LinkedIn or tweet us on Twitter. Thanks for watching my video. Thank you.